I think being on stage and being forced to be honest will remind you as a person sometimes of like, it's easy to forget about this. You get older, things get crazier, life gets harder. It's easy to not be so honest with others or honest with yourself if you're not paying attention. So it forces you to do that. And then you are, and you feel better as a result. Weird. It's like honesty makes you feel better than, withholding or, not just being straight up about something.
Ladies and gentlemen, and anyone else who is here, my name is Dom Amour, and you are listening to the Black Man Talking Emotions podcast. Today's episode, we will be speaking to my great friend, James Ferrero, about Los Angeles acting, producing, and Shakespeare. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances. And one man in his time plays many parts. I feel like when I think of you, I think of theater and the arts on the stage. You're an amazing performer and producer. You're always up to something, and I love your charisma on and off the stage. When did you fall in love with theater?
Oh, man, that's a good question. I mean, I was fortunate enough when I was growing up, born and raised in Los Angeles, all around this art scene. And so my dad was an actor for a number of years and did a lot of theater. So I was very lucky to go see a lot of theater when I was young. Sometimes it went over my head, but still there was something fascinating about like, oh, what is this? Like, wait, how does this all work? And then as I got older, I started to explore it more myself and we're like, well, maybe I'll give that a shot, see what that's like. And so, it starts at first because it was just like, well, it's what my dad did. Like, maybe I'll see if I want to do it too. And then I pretty quickly flipped to it just being my thing and was like, no, I want to do this because I really enjoy it. So it was, man, I think I was probably about 12 when I did my first like anything on stage. And I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do in some capacity.
How much did your father influence you? Like you said, you got to that point where you were like, I'm just going to do it. Like, was he the guy? Was it like, damn, I want to do that? He's an actor. Acting's so cool. All of the stuff that he was in, the movies and stuff. Like, how did he influence you?
He wanted me to pursue what I wanted to do and wanted me to, find whatever made me happy in life. And from him, he was like, the one thing I really know anything about is theater, is acting, film. So he raised me with like an appreciation for that, but never pushed me into it. It was never like, oh, you got to go pursue it. You got to do this. He was excited by it because he was like, oh, good. I can, if you want advice or if you want tips, like I can actually give you help on that. If you wanted to go into law or if you wanted to be a doctor, I couldn't help you at all with that. But here I can. So he was always good about like never wanted me to feel like this was something that he was pushing me into. So yeah, he was very influential on that. And, just getting to have him come see shows I would do was always nice. And, I would always get feedback from him afterwards that was like, I mean, he was always very positive and like, wasn't sitting there just like taking notes the whole time, but like was also looking at it from a very discerning point of view. So I knew that if he liked it and if he liked what I was doing, yeah, he's my dad. He's being supportive. But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, but like, you wouldn't just throw that out there if you really didn't like it, you would just be nice and be like, nice work. And then not talk about it probably.
See, I feel like both of us have such a different entry point to the performing arts and theater because I didn't start doing theater until I was a sophomore in high school. Yeah. And even then, that was just a backup role in Oliver. And I eventually really got into it my senior year of high school. And I was in Wizard of Oz. I was in Aladdin, the junior as Jafar, and I was in Inherit the Wind. I was in all of these shows that one year. And it was like this whole high school experience. I was big on choir. And then the last year it was like, oh, I'm a theater person now. It's like, what? So, and I still didn't even gravitate towards it in college. I didn't become a theater major until my sophomore year. I was a music major. I was like, music's what I'm going to do. Music. Nope, theater. I want to perform. I want to actually be able to, be on the microphone, talk, people see me. Since I got into the game a little later, Shakespeare, I hated Shakespeare. I with a passion. We did Shakespearean shows in high school, and I was just like, I'm not going to do that stupid show. It sounds horrible. And then we read Shakespeare in high school, and I was like, this is so stupid. I did not enjoy it. Then I got to college, and the first show, I believe, was 12th Night. And I was like, oh my God, this is gross. Why would I do that? No, I'm okay on that. Eventually, they did Hamlet. And I was like, okay, I've been performing at this point. This is junior year. I've been doing shows every semester. I've been working. I've been getting better. All right, I'm an audition. And I got Guildenstern, which turned out to be one of the most fun roles I ever played. Me and my guy, Jeremy, shout out to Jeremy, were Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. And it just was so much fun how we created our own backstories, how we really pushed the narratives with some of the dirty jokes, with the relationships. And I was like, the world building in these shows are just next level. You don't have as much leeway in other shows to create all of this mischief. Like my backstory was I was an African prince who went to college up with Hamlet and Rosencrantz. So that's when we got super cool. And I had a secret affair with Ophelia, and we were just out in these streets. We weren't jocks, but we were the snooty. We had capes on, and we would always flail our capes would go around our arm, and we'll be like, we're here kind of thing. And that energy really fit the characters well, because the idea is that you're not really able to tell which one's apart. And the funny thing that our director did was he cast a black dude and a white dude and said, we're going to make him black and white, and you still won't be able to tell who was who. And that's how incredible it was, and I was like, that's incredible. It was great. And we really blended into each other. It was the closest to method acting I'd ever done, where we would put the capes on. And when the capes were on, we were dicks to everyone in the cast. No one enjoyed us in the rooms because we would just like, hey, you piece of shit. Like we were just talking crazy to everyone. It was so much fun. And that way people got to the point where by the end of it, they hated us, and they, everyone, they wanted Rosencrantz and Guildenstern dead. That was how it was supposed to happen. So it was fun. It was fun stuff. But once again, it was easily my least favorite. And it wasn't until I did that show. But then after that, I still was kind of, Then we moved to LA, and I truly began to enjoy the language, the freedom of it, because of the groups that we did with Trash Can Shakespeare, and then of course Riot Shakespeare in LA. And that even spread out to St. Louis to a group called Psycho Shakespeare, which I got to do all three of those. And then of course your show, which also Shakes on the Rocks. I felt like Shakespeare was too proper before that. It was snooty. That you have to be this famous actor. And I just hated it. I was like, oh, this is so stupid. But when we moved it to the bar room, and I feel like I can play with it and began to understand, these aren't rich people. These aren't rich folk in these scenes. This isn't this powerful person. It's normal people making dick jokes. That's what it is. And they're trying to get from A to B. It's normal people. And so when we brought it to that bar level and actually started to play with it as normal people and having fun with each other and just joking and very lackadaisical, it just really made the Shakespeare come off the page to me. What was the moment that Shakespeare clicked for you? Did you ever have that struggle like me? Was it difficult? Because I feel like you are obsessed with it.
Yes, you'd think so, judging by how much my name flashes across whenever anything Shakespeare related pops up on the LA bar scene nowadays.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough, the first thing I ever did on stage was I was that kid who was in Shakespeare camp when he was 12. So it started from a very early age, and it was fun. I don't know, I was there with my friends. We were just having a good time. I wasn't, looking at this as anything ultra serious or maybe even something I was going to do as a career, but it was a fun way to spend my summer. Also, just weirdly enough, the first actual show I ever did was in middle school, was also Oliver. So
classic.
I feel you on that. But yeah, then I got into high school. I kept kind of doing it. Shakespeare was always there. It was kind of in the background. In college, it was my first kind of time that I got to do Shakespeare in that kind of fast and loose format. I went to UC Santa Cruz, and there was what used to be Shakespeare Santa Cruz was affiliated with the campus up there. Now it's Santa Cruz Shakespeare. It's something else that's off campus. But there was a lot of stuff they would do with the university. And there was a show that they would shorten down to like an hour long, and then they would rehearse it in the fall and then take it on tour in the spring for schools, libraries, things like that. It was called Shakes to Go. That was it, Shakes to Go. And so like from the earliest days when I was in college, I was like, I really want to do this show. That sounds like so much fun. Also, it was the only acting gig you could get up there in school that actually paid you because it was through the festival. So it was the idea of like, I could get paid to act and do Shakespeare. That sounds like fun. So I auditioned the first couple years, didn't get in. My third year, I auditioned and I got in as an understudy, which was my first time doing that. And I was understudying like 4 different parts and was just like, oh, wow, this is crazy. And I got to go on a couple times, which was so much fun. You can do Shakespeare in this fun, kind of like slapdash way that still you can get the point across. I had never seen that before. And so that kind of stayed with me, but I didn't really do anything else probably until around till around like 2017, I think, when Trash Can started. But in between then, I was working in Los Angeles. I did Shakespeare. I did other classical theater in like some of the bigger theaters in Los Angeles, doing small parts here and there. Noise Within, Will Geer's Theatricum Botanicum. So I was like, oh, okay, like this would be great. I'll just keep doing this. But as any young actor will tell you, you may get a couple things early on, but you get your equity card or you work for a little bit longer, and then they'll find new people. They'll find younger people, and that's their prerogative. That's fine. But then I noticed how I was like, oh, this is acting. There's nothing consistent about this. So then I was like, all right, we have to find something else. And then when we started doing Shakespeare in bars, basically, it was a wake up call to me as well of just like, oh, it can be this down to earth and make this much sense. We can actually talk to each other and talk about our real life problems in these plays and still have fun and still have a blast. And it could still have an impact because, you sit around, like you said, like highfalutin, pretentious Shakespeare for a while, and just actors who just, will just do it in this very over the top way. And then they look at you. And if you're not up to that standard, or, you didn't study here. And I was like, this is exactly like what you said. People hate Shakespeare. And I completely understand why. And if you've ever sat through boring Shakespeare, which I have plenty of, it's horrible. It's the worst. You want to just like claw your eyes out. Getting to do it in a bar took a lot of that onus off, took a lot of that pressure off. And then you could just have more fun, which then as a result, it felt more honest. So yeah, that's when started working on that, and we worked together on Trash Can for a long time, and that was very enjoyable. And in the process of that, I was like, I was starting to get my producer hat on at that point. I had worked on the technical side of things for a while. I'd started producing more, and I was like, I want to do a show that's like this. I don't want to do what this show is, but I want to do my own thing. What would that be? And that's how Shakes and the Rocks came about, which was basically like, okay, the barroom Shakespeare scene for the most part is like, we give you a part a month ahead of time. You learn it. You come in the night of without rehearsal. Maybe you run lines with someone, but then you just do it. That's fun. That's great. With Shakes, we were like, okay, let's take all of the bias out of casting, which was another thing that I was, we've all been on the receiving end in some way. And especially if you're in LA, you're going to be on the receiving end of it no matter what you do. And I was like, everyone has a bias. I have a bias when I'm casting. Everyone does, whether you want to admit it or not. So I was like, let's take that out of it. I just want a group of actors who I know can do their shit, basically. And we're going to randomize it. So we're going to randomize the play selection, and we're going to randomize the part. So it's not going to be anyone assigning a part to anyone. We get a nice diverse group of actors up there, and then you see how, well, you're used to playing the clown and everything. In this, you might be the ingenue, or vice versa. You're always the romantic lead. Now you get to be the villain. It's like you get to have some flexibility with that, which we found so many actors that were so excited about that because they were like, when are we going to get an opportunity to play this part anywhere else?
Yeah.
Unfortunately. So that's how it all started. And we started that in 2018. and have, gone through changes. We've changed venues. We've brought people in. We've brought new people in. We've expanded upon the show, and it's gotten only better and better, in my opinion.
It was a lot of fun when I went. I had a good time
Yeah.
coming to the show, and I saw it twice, I believe. I did 2 of them before I moved to Atlanta and before the pandemic, of course. And
Right.
like you said, it really is a different twist. It's so much more fun.
Mm-hmm.
I love being able to take those liberties and do those different things. Because going back to what you said about when you see it with the proper people, first show I ever saw was Julius Caesar. I'll never forget. It was at the St. Louis Symphony Powell Theater.
It's still my personal favorite.
I fell asleep during it.
It can be dry.
I'm a sixth grader, like.
Oh, that's rough. That's rough.
It was like, why are we seeing Julius Caesar right now? So it was rough, but like you said, after some years, I like that one more now. It's not my favorite is Richard III. Richard III is
I like that one a lot.
Such a good show.
Oh yeah,
and the story was incredible. I feel like Shakespeare just gotten to this point where he was like, I can do this in my sleep when he got to Richard III. That was just a great, great show. I know that Romeo and Juliet or Taming of the Shrew or Midsummer Night's Dream, but I'm like, Richard III, baby. I love me some Richard III.
I've always loved that play, and we just did it last night with Riot Shakespeare, and it was just an absolute blast. And I was like, this play immediately shot up in my various opinions. I'm like, ooh, well, what's your favorite one? And it's always changing. I feel Caesar's always kind of up there, but man, Richard III is just it's so juicy. It's so beautiful.
It's so juicy. I enjoy that. But going away from your producing again, going back to the act and stuff, one of my favorite things to talk about with just actors is our weird quirks, the different things that we do for our process to get ready for a role. I usually create a huge backstory. It's always something ridiculous. I still know a lot of I was in Greece in college, and I played Roger, but instead of it just being Roger and just random dude, his name was Roger Jenkins. He was born May 10th, 1954, and he was living on the south side of Chicago with Duty, but his mother was one of the teachers at this school on the north side of Chicago. So we got to go to that school because his mother, and Duty was my best friend, so he came with me. Duty got his nickname because one day we were on walking home, and this gang member came up to us and scared him so much he pooped his pants. And when the gang member asked him, he's like, "What did you just do?" He was like, "I Duty my pants," and that's why we called him Duty. I had this whole backstory created so that when I was on stage, I could truly just feel like I was that person. And even though I know the script doesn't ask me those questions I could answer them. I could find ways. If I'm having a side conversation, I could create a little story where we're not talking too loud for the microphone, but we could be having a real conversation in that world. And I know this person as much as I know that person. It's not necessary. It's not necessary for everyone. It's just something that I truly enjoy doing for myself. Even in Shakespeare, when we did the trash can stuff, I would find ways to create these little side quests or side stories to keep me fully engaged in the show. What different things did you do to get yourself ready for a role or put into the universe?
Oh, that's good. Already I'll say your backstory for Greece already sounds more interesting than Greece. So I'd much rather watch that. I gotta be honest. Yeah, it all depends on the show. It depends on what we're doing. I'd say that whatever it is, whether it's a full run of a show, whether it's a one night performance of something, I need to know the lines. I need to have the lines down cold and just in my head. Cause I'm down to improv. I'm down to mess around. I'm down to, see what's feeling fresh in there, but I need to have the lines in the back of my head at all times in case something goes south. At least I know that that's cold and I don't have to be standing there going, next part, because then I know it's I'm losing it. The audience is looking at me and going, well, he's not ready for this. Annoy yourself to death with learning lines. You're doing it in the shower, you're doing it in the car, you're walking around your apartment, walking down the street, whatever. Just put your headphones in if you have to, so it doesn't look like you're just talking to yourself, but just run it and say it out loud so you can hear it in your head. It kind of plays back in there. It's almost recorded into your brain. So that's the first thing is I got to get the lines down. Then it's tough with the one night shows sometimes because you don't really get a chance to rehearse with people, but I love the rehearsal process of getting to work with someone and just getting to like play off of them and figure out, okay, what's your thing? What are you doing? What's your, where are you coming out with this? And like, what's our chemistry on stage? Some people you might have great chemistry with, some people not so much. But then if you do have great chemistry, that's great. Like, half your job's already done. Then it's like, great, we can kind of keep an eye on each other throughout the scene and stay present in the scene. So I'm not prepping too much stuff, but I'm also staying with them. The tricky part is if you're up there with someone who maybe you don't have great chemistry with, who maybe isn't putting that amount of work into it, and then you have to kind of do some heavy lifting. You do what you have to do to make the scene work. As for the backstory stuff, that's always fun. I used to do that a lot when I was in college, for sure. I would just be sitting like, yeah, what's my story? What's my thing here? And I think it still comes up now and again. I'm also like you were talking about with music, I'm a huge music person. So I love making playlists for characters I'm doing, even if it's for a one night thing. I'll get on my Spotify. I'll start looking up things, hearing things. It can be such a random assortment of genres, but it doesn't particularly matter. Maybe one thing is about the tone of the show. One's about the mood of the character. One is maybe about a specific thing that I say or do. It could be lyric based. It could be rhythm based. It could be the melody. If you had no idea, you'd probably look at it and say, what do these all have to do with one another? And I'm like, well, in my brain, it all makes sense. And so I'll just listen to that. And that gets so many ideas festering. But I guess the big thing is that I have to prep myself enough ahead of time and be so ready and on top of my shit to go that when I get on stage, I can just have fun. I can just respond to what's happening in the moment, and I'm not prepping anything too much.
I don't like to prep anything too much. I'm the same way with that. I want to know what I'm saying as good as possible, but also I want to get it to a place where I know it so well that if I do have to improv, I know how to find my way back. And I also understand one thing my teacher always used to say to me when I was younger in college, Ken Stilson, I'll give him this. He used to always say the words as if they're the first time. And I mean, when you're younger, you don't really, you hear it and you're like, oh, well, whatever, what I'm saying? But it's so true when I sing, especially in theater, when you're doing a song every night, 8 performances for a week, you got to find ways to make that song interesting. You got to make ways to be like, what am I going to discover tonight? And I feel like every show I ever do, by the last show, I'm like, man, I figured something out that I wish I was doing the whole time. And it's because I'm allowing myself to speak almost as if I don't know what I'm about to say. But I do know what I'm about to say. It's all a mind trick to me. I'm going out there, I'm lax, I'm listening to Jay-Z. I'm listening to something that doesn't have anything to do with the show. After I memorize it, I put away the book. I don't ever look at the lines again because it's memorized. And if I don't know it anymore, it's going to come out the way it's going to come out. And those little things change everything. And for me, that's why the next topic, it goes back to just, I love the stage more than the camera. I prefer to be on stage acting, but of course I'll do both. And for me, Samuel L. Jackson, Denzel Washington, they're both those actors who were stage actors in LA and New York who gravitate to both of those worlds. And they're huge influences to me for the acting work that I do. It made them stronger actors. And they've admitted to that. And I admire that so much. It's just great to see someone going back and working on their craft after they've achieved what I consider the mountaintop. I'm like, man, they're the most famous people in the world, but they're still like, yo, I'm going to go back. I'm going to do Julius Caesar on Broadway, or I'm going to go back, do something at the Tate in LA. And it's just like, wow, that's incredible that, someone is willing to do that. And it's so challenging to work in a room as a character with people 2 feet away from you. That stage experience helps you in other performance spaces. It helps you in normal life. It helps me center my emotions. I feel like it helps me when I'm in tense moments in my normal life because of the experience on stage where I have to find this space to be so controlled and not pay attention to one person, but also be so into this conversation that it feels real, but also I know it's not real in my actual head, but I have to convince myself it's real. I feel more balanced because I've worked in a world where I have to create a fourth wall and live in that space. Who are some actors that inspired you? Would you prefer the stage or camera? And what are some things that encourage you in real life from acting?
Oh, wow. Well, in terms of the stage and camera, I find even though, yeah, the majority of my experience that I started with was on stage, and I've done more on stage than on camera. I love the opportunity to get on camera whenever I can. It is like it's a different muscle that I'm used to working, and it really does. With the cameras like right there, it really does force you to just be honest in the moment and to not rely on any of your actor tricks and BS. So that's always a good reminder of like, they're gonna see that you're faking that. So I'm like, okay. Um, I would say that, yeah, I mean, for me, for the most part, theater is still like my number one love. It always has been, and there's something about being there with a live audience and getting the live audience reactions to things is just. I mean, whether it's dramatic and you're hearing a gasp, or whether it's comedic and you get a laugh, which is honestly the best feeling to get. As anyone that's ever done that, you know how that just the natural high that you get from that. So I would definitely say that. As far as actors, man, oof, so many, so many. The two you mentioned, Samuel Jackson and Denzel, both. Yeah, I mean, Denzel is one of those actors who, and I always am drawn to these actors who it looks like they're they're never bullshitting you on camera or on stage. They are just responding, and they are just they're making the words sound new, and you have their complete attention the entire time. Denzel does that. The late great Philip Seymour Hoffman, I think, is one of the best examples of that. Is just someone who's endlessly interesting in what he always said a line not like the way you were expecting to hear it, or not like you would expect to say it, but then you'd hear it and go, oh, yeah, but that makes sense. That just, it's because it sounded so natural. It just, he wasn't thinking about that. And so he was always present in those moments.
There's a specific scene that comes to my mind
Mhm.
from Fences, where you
Oh,
see
yeah.
his stage performance of Fences, in the movie's performance as well. So you go back and you watch James Earl Jones' version,
Yeah.
and you see how different he delivers the lines compared to Denzel. And Denzel is so much more relaxed. Is
Hmm.
so much more. You could tell. I mean, I'm not saying that James Earl Jones was like delivering them wrong or bad,
Hmm.
or
It
I'm
was
just
different.
saying
Yeah.
it was so different. You felt as if Denzel had said it before, like, to his kid. Like, this isn't the first time he thought about. I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it. It's incredible.
It's just that incredible thing of it's like it sounds so easy, but if it was easy, all the actors would be doing this. But like you get into those moments of it's like you're in a scene with someone, and you're on stage, you're on camera, especially on stage, because like I said, on camera you're forced to be honest. On stage, you can get away with a little bit more things, and I think a lot of actors fall into the I have to go into actory voice now and do this thing, and it's just like sometimes if you're really great, you can pull that off. It's fine. But like so often you're sitting there looking at someone and you're like, you're talking at them. You're not even talking to them. You're barely even looking at them. Why do I care? And it's amazing when someone just stops and looks and just says it to you. It sounds easy, but the audience just goes, whoa, oh, interesting. What was that? So any actors I can think of who are just so great at just communicating that. Paul Giamatti is another example of someone, just one of these like incredible character actors who can deliver something so naturally and fresh in that moment. On the flip side, and like more lead parts, Viola Davis. Whenever I see Viola Davis in anything, just when I think I've seen her do something that's blown my mind, she does something else that I'm just like, your range and versatility is ridiculous, and you commit to it 120% every time. Fences, great example of that. In her scene, in her moment, I remember just sitting there during the trailer. I hadn't even seen the movie yet, and they showed a clip from her in the trailer, and I just sat there and went, I just feel like someone just ran a knife like right through my chest and was like, all right, yeah, you wanted me to feel pain in that moment, I feel it. No acting necessary, basically. I feel like it's all very reciprocal. Like when I'm in conversations with people, whether they're personal, friendly conversations, whether they're more producer conversations or logistical things, there's a certain honesty in how you go about how you communicate with people. And we'd all like to think that we're honest people and we tell the truth. And, I think most of us, for the most part, we do. We all, cheat on things. We tell white lies here and there. Like, that's just kind of part of everyday life. But I think being on stage and being forced to be honest will remind you as a person sometimes of like, it's easy to forget about this. You get older, things get crazier, life gets harder. It's easy to not be so honest with others or honest with yourself if you're not paying attention. So it forces you to do that. And then you are, and you feel better as a result. Weird. It's like honesty makes you feel better than, withholding or, not just being straight up about something. So yeah, I think it constantly is a good like massage for my brain. So, and that's how I carry myself in my relationships with people, whether they are personal relationships or whether they are more professional relationships, whether that's with co-producers or designers or actors.
I'll speak about this later in the pod, but I wanted to make sure I stuck the landing on how important my friendship to James is. James made LA better for me. He truly invested time into becoming a dear friend of mine. And he introduced me to my wife. We worked together on stage, but I never felt like he was around just because he wanted to use me. He never asked me for anything but friendship. I knew that if he was free and I asked him to hang out, he wouldn't make up an excuse or just ghost me. LA was hard because I felt like I was an outsider most of the time. I felt like I didn't dress well enough. I felt like I was too poor to hang out in the places I wanted to hang out. I felt like people just dealt with me because I was around. But James opened my eyes. He saw me for who I was. And I can't thank him enough for being an amazing friend. LA is such a unique place because performers flock there. But for stage work, you really have to be willing to produce your own work, to work consistently, because it's not about stage work. It's about reality. It's about camera work out there usually. So there's a lot of work for a lot of people, but just doing theater is not the route to a career in Los Angeles. How do you feel that you're doing with your grind? Do you feel like you're consistently filling up your love tank? You feel like that grind is still kicking your ass?
I think the grind is always kicking my ass in some ways, for sure. I would say that, like, at least artistically, I'm feeling very fulfilled at the moment. It's true. The financial aspect of it is always tricky. And really, unless you're, a constant working actor in film and television, or you're booking a ton of regional work all around the country and you're traveling around, it's difficult to supplement that financially. So, we do our other side hustles in there. But I will say, from the artistic side, like I'd said, like having worked in like bigger theaters on bigger things and just not feeling as fulfilled in some places with that. Some places I did. But when I discovered the smaller scene, the black box theater scene, basically in LA, I knew right away, I'm like, yep, the budgets aren't going to be as high. The money will definitely not be flowing in this business. No one's in black box theater for the money of it. But there was such an enjoyment I got from being around people who were like, man, we're all just crazy enough and we're doing this because we want to do it, because we love to do it. And doing Shakespeare in bars was fascinating because I worked with so many different groups and met so many different people. And now, fortunately, I think we're all getting to know each other better. And I've met some really amazing producers and actors through that scene who are just so supportive and just like, and they show up. They will post about your show. You post about their show, then they'll show up to your show. And it's like, that's something that was new for me because it's true. You don't get a lot of that in LA. You do get a lot of people that talk the talk and, this too, of just like, yeah, I'll come. I'll see you at the thing. They don't. It happens. And you kind of get used to that and you become a little hardened to that. So to know that there are people who consistently will show up for you and will consistently pitch for you in even an environment as small as that is so enlightening and so refreshing. And it's sort of, I think, woken me up and on the creative side of things where I'm able to try different creative aspects as I'm still figuring out like, what is it exactly that is there something I just want to commit to full time, or do I like kind of doing a lot of different things?
Do you feel like the pandemic has made it harder or easier in Los Angeles?
Both, I'd say.
Okay.
It made it harder, obviously, because you couldn't meet up. You couldn't meet up with a group of friends and even read a play in someone's living room and just, get some wine and read a play and just have fun. We did that on Zoom, but, it's not nearly the same. And then you definitely couldn't go see shows. You couldn't do shows. I had a various assortment of designer work that I had set up because I also do sound design as well, that all vanished when the pandemic started. So that's a lot of money that disappeared, which was not fun. I think it's made it easier for certain groups of people, for any producers that don't want to meet up with you in person. Now, the self-tape became the constant thing. And I remember talking to someone when things were starting to come back to normal a little bit, and they said self-tapes are going away. Now they know they can do it. They know that they can just ask you, yeah, put your stuff on tape and just send it to us. We don't have to book a studio. We don't have to bring you in. We don't have to go through all of that. We can just look at your video. And if we don't, if we don't like it within the first 5 seconds, we can turn it off. We don't have to hear your whole thing, which is kind of the harsh reality of that. So I think it has made, and on one hand, self-tapes are great. You don't have to travel to Santa Monica at 4 p.m. It's amazing. At the same time, depending on the show, if it's for a commercial, sure, self-tape is fine. But if you're going out for specifically anything in theater, I would find that really hard to cast someone if I've only seen you on tape. I don't know what you're like in the room. I don't know if you can take direction. I don't know if you can take a redirection. I don't know the kind of energy you carry yourself with. How many takes did you do of that before you went, this is the best version of myself? And then you show up and it's like, oh, that's not at all like what your tape was. So I would say definitely made it harder in more ways than one. But if it's been made easier for anyone, probably mostly for the producing side of things.
For sure. And what you said right there is so true. Like, you walk into a room, just the way that you say hi, like, does your voice resonate? Oh my God, did it make you sit up and be like, oh, hey, hi? Like, you can't get that from a video. Even if the video's recording is stupendous, it's still going to be lacking that eye contact. It's still going to be lacking that smile or energy that you only really get in person. I mean, you see it and you're like, oh, that he looks great, but I don't know. But if I walk in a room and you're like, oh, he smells good. Oh, he sounds great, this and that. Oh, look at how nice his hair looks in the light. Like, it's a whole different perspective in person. And a lot of people are really just, getting to this place where they're okay with swiping left or swiping right.
And on that point, there's actually, that's a great example of, there was one time I was producing a play, and I was sitting in auditions, and an actor came in who, if this had been a self-tape or I saw them, on paper, saw their headshot, not the fit I would have thought for that part at all. Guy comes in, I'm reading with him. One, you're reading with the actor. It's not just them doing a monologue or reading a scene by themselves. You get to read with them, which is another big advantage. And so I got to hear him read, and I was like, whoa, this guy's bringing something different to it, though, that I wasn't expecting, but it's good. It's a good kind of different. And then we were talking to him a little bit about the show, and we had some people come in, that were just like, well, I haven't, like, we would send out copies of the play to people, and they were like, oh, well, I haven't read the whole play. You're not required to, it's fine. But this guy was like, yeah, I was reading through it, and I had a question about this, and he was asking questions about the character in the play in different moments. And I was like, okay, so this guy's also done the work. He's come in with questions. He's taking redirections. He's checking off all the boxes. And I wouldn't have known any of that if he had just submitted a self-tape. I probably would have just seen him like, yeah, he reads good, but he's not the right physical type for what we want. And we probably would have, maybe skipped over him and gone with someone else, which would have been a huge mistake, because we did cast him, and that was one of the best casting decisions we made. And still, I think about his performance in that, and I was like, how close were we to missing out on someone who really made this play special?
One thing isn't very clear, my love. Should the teacher stand so near, my love? Graduation's almost here, my love. Come on and teach me tonight. Oh,
I loved doing this tune. This is from my LA residency at Idle Hour in North Hollywood. I had a monthly gig there, and we would jam the classics just like this tune, Teach Me Tonight, sang by the greatest. You can listen to my music on all streaming platforms, and you can check me out for more information at domlamore.com, where you can get anything and everything Dom Lamore.
I don't know what I'm doing, baby. Won't you come and teach me tonight? Oh, come on and wrap yourself around me, baby. Yeah. Make sure the candle's lit. Oh, and I want you to come in here, lay on down, and teach me tonight.
So, of course, you introduced me to my wife, Adrian, February 6, 2019, which happened in the most LA way I could possibly think. You created a Facebook event for friends to meet up if they could. There was no event. We all worked so much that instead of texting and calling everyone, you just said, hey, I'm going to be at a bar on this date at this time. If you are free, you should come. And you had a hell of a turnout for LA standards, in my opinion.
That was a good night, yeah.
It was a lot of fun. A lot of great people came out. How often do you feel like you have to do things like that to see people still?
I mean, it's been hard, obviously, since the pandemic started. It hasn't been a thing. That was an event idea that was actually thought up by my partner, Nicole. We were talking one time about like, hey, why is it so hard to see people in LA? And why can't we just hang out with our friends? But it's not after a show. It's not at a birthday where there's always something else. If it's like, oh, good show. Oh, thanks. I have to go. Or like, it's your birthday. I don't want to monopolize all your time. But it's like, no event. Nope, nothing. We'll just go to a bar. We'll like tell people that we like, be like, hey, just show up. It doesn't have to be for anything special. Show up when you can. Grab a drink or two. We'll just chat, catch up, see what's going on. And it seemed like such a simple idea, but I was like, yeah, like we never get to do that. So we did a few of those. And then by the time we did that, we were like, all right, I think we kind of got the ball rolling on this. So we haven't been able to do it really since the pandemic started. And of course, like every time that we think like, oh, let's bring it back, then, there's a surge or there's a scare. And then we're like, well, maybe we'll hold off again. So we will be bringing it back at some point because we just love the idea of, we love to see our friends.
You and I were very similar in the fact that I feel like we were bar rats. And I don't say that as a negative thing, but, when I was in college, I worked so much that at the end of the night, we would go to a bar afterwards because we didn't get to go to bars. So we would have to cross the bridge and go to the strip club because they were the only bar that was open. And we would just sit at the bar. Like we didn't go to the strip club to be at a strip club. We went to be at a bar. Mm-hmm. And then I moved to Chicago and I moved to LA. And when I was living back home in St. Louis, I usually gravitated towards a bar. If I had a bar, that was my healthy, safe place. And LA was Idle Hour for me. And I feel like I would go there and you would just be there. And I'd be like, that's perfect. Because like, of course, you go places where you want to see people but also, I felt like staying in the house, I wouldn't even go and drink sometimes. Sometimes I would just go to see people. Mm-hmm. How you doing? Oh, it's good to see you. It's good to be out of the house. It's good to be social. And I truly enjoyed that. So, of course, I was going to make it out if I didn't have to work. And that it was one of the best nights ever. And of course, at that point, LA is so fast and everyone has to be out there hustling and grinding and getting their stuff positioned for their success that you get kind of down. And I got to a point where I didn't believe I was going to meet anyone in that city. I thought I was going to be there for a couple of years, keep on having these weird dates and meeting these weird people. Then I was going to get up out of there. And you helped me, of course, because, I found that person in that event and it was so dope. And you also found someone in the mix as well with Nicole. And just kind of give people a word picture of what's it like in Los Angeles as a single person, because I feel like no one believes me when I say it's absolutely horrible.
It's an experience, to be sure. Yeah. So Nicole and I met doing rehearsals for a show a little over 5 years ago. I had, been in LA since 2012. I've been back in LA since 2012. And I had been through various relationships. Nothing really lasted all that long. And in that in-between time, when I was single, while I was still trying to get over, my ex, or trying to figure out what I was doing, or, what was going on, I'll say it wasn't as hard as it is for some people, just because when you're working on the theater scene and you're meeting a lot of people who are like-minded, and you're meeting a lot of very attractive people who are like-minded, is very fun. So I will say in those in-between single times, I mean, I feel every time I would go through I was single, some stuff kind of happened, and then I'd be in a relationship, and then I'd be single again, and then a little bit crazier things happened, same. And then leading up to before I met Nicole, in my in my months and years of being single before that, were just you're well, why the hell not? We're here, we're alive, we're young, let's see what happens. And it was just all kinds of insanity, which was really fun and also exhausting, and obviously not super fulfilling by the end of it. It was this was cool, but where's this all leading, if for nothing else? And so, by the time Nicole and I met, it was just this wake up call of oh, okay, this is different. This is fun, but it's also it feels like this could be sustainable. What? Which is just not something you're used to out here at all, especially if you're dating someone who's also working in the same industry as you. And, there's don't date actors. And I would say for the most part, that's true. Be really wary about that. But she definitely was the exception to many rules. And I was well, I'm not gonna fuck this one up. I'm in this, and that is that. It's crazy. It's a crazy time though.
That's how I felt. It's the same thing. Me and Adrian met, and I remember the next day I was hanging out with a friend, and I was I think I'm dating somebody. And they were what? And I was I'm gonna date this person because she's not weird like everyone else. She's so nice. She seemed so normal, and she actually engaged in conversation like people I knew back home did. That was the best way to describe it. People back in St. Louis, they're some of the nicest people in the country, and you could talk to them and feel like they're actually engaged in looking at you and actually really listening to you. And she did all those things. And I was I'm not used to that in Los Angeles. I'm not used to meeting people that I think are actually here in this room. And that's so bizarre. I mean, you say, what do you mean, Dominic? And I was there were some nights at Shakespeare when we went to Trash Can. And I remember this multiple times where we would do all of this stuff and prep before the show and after the show. But there were moments I was just sitting in the room and I felt like I was the only one there. I was no one's here to meet anyone new. No one's here to actually be there for you. I feel like they're just all here for themselves, and I'm not saying everyone was like that, but just some days I felt like it was just me in a room with a bunch of people. And that was that. I could be sitting down for 20, 30 minutes and just looking around, and no one is trying to engage with me. And I'm just I could sit here and no one would notice me. Yeah. And that was LA in so many ways. You could do so much stuff and be so active. And people from home would be man, I saw you did a show in Hollywood and you did this and this, and you were in Santa Monica on the pier and you were this and this. And they see it and it's it's so much stuff. But while you're in it and you're there, you're just man, I would much rather be home with a big group of friends having a beer, because I felt like I was consistently by myself trying to achieve a goal that everyone else was trying to achieve. And people were kind of putting themselves in position that if they needed to, they could, push me out of the way so they can get what they wanted. But also they would cling to you if they knew they can get something from you. And you felt that energy all around the city. It was so difficult for me.
It's the toughest thing about that, because it's really easy to get lonely in a city this big with so many people. And it does take a moment for you to, I've gone through various different friend groups of people who people who you think all right, I think I found my people. And then, there's a falling out or something happens. You're well, maybe not, or maybe you just drift apart. But if you stick around, if you stick around and find your groups of people, which I think we both found in that sense, all of a sudden it's so much easier. Where then I'm like, I don't want to hang out with any other groups of people other than the groups I know want to talk to me and I want to talk to them. And it's not just going to be this like, well, let's just talk about this opportunity I have and I don't really care about you at all. Or yeah, like you said, if it's like, let me work with you and yeah, we can help each other. By that, I mean, you can help me. And when you're not helping me anymore, I don't need you. Then we'll, just like split off. I'm like, oh, okay. So you didn't really care about that. You wanted me for that and you got it. So I guess good for you.
Yeah.
Like, you're not someone that I want to hang out with then, I guess.
Yeah. And see, the thing is, I eventually found a group in LA through Adrian. Adrian's friend group was so polite, so honest, so encouraging that, when we left, I was like, oh man, this sucks because I'm leaving this group. This group is so great. And they were so cool. So it really sucked to leave after that. But I had to go.
Yeah.
For me, it was a different thing. For you, you're a California kid. And I know it's difficult for California kids to leave the state of California.
True.
Do you see yourself ever leaving LA? Do you ever see yourself leaving the state, moving somewhere else, settling down somewhere else?
No, not at this time. I feel like I've been now back in LA for over 10 years, just sort of solidifying myself again. And like you said, like I'm from here. So for me, like this wasn't a place I moved to from home. Like this is my home. This is what I'm used to. And I love it for that. There's as with any place, there's plenty that's there that's not very fun or very enjoyable. But I've been spending over 10 years, like, setting myself down and like making roots here and just, making relationships with people that I'm like, and I'm also at a point now where I'm like, maybe in my 20s, that might have been somewhat alluring, but like now I'm like, I'm not going to get up, throw everything away from me and start over in a completely new place where I have no connection whatsoever and try to start all over again unless I have good reason to. So the only reason that something would really take me away right now would be if there was a work opportunity. If it was like, well, there's this really amazing thing you don't want to pass up. It's going to be huge for your career. You will have to move to this city for, a number of months or like maybe years, who knows? And in that case, I would, because there'd be something waiting for me when I went there. But I don't have the interest in just like packing everything up and settling down in a place where I don't know anyone and don't have any connections and I have to start that all over again. The idea of that seems really tiring. Also, like if I'm going to be struggling as an actor, like you said, I'm not only am I a California native, but I'm a SoCal boy and I like my winters nice and balmy. And if I'm going to be struggling, I want to be struggling where I'm not also freezing my ass off.
I always tell people the best place to be a bum is Venice Beach, in my opinion.
True.
I don't know why anyone would go anywhere other than Venice or San Diego. If you were like, Dominique, where are you going to be homeless? I'm going to be homeless on the beach. At the end of the show, I always do this. We've spoken about everything that we've done and we've gotten through all of our subjects. All I want to know now is, how do you feel?
I feel good. This was so nice. It's so we talked a lot about communication and just like, having people you can talk to and talk about things. And like, this was so refreshing just to be able to talk about life and acting and theater with such a good friend as yourself and just such a very casual, fun setting where, there was no pressure on there. And it was really, it was really, really nice. I really appreciated this.
All right. Hey, cheers to you.
Cheers to you, man.
I want to thank you for listening to the Black Men Talking Emotions podcast. The opening quote credit goes to old Billy Shakespeare. And shout out to James for being on the pod. Follow James at ThereelJFerrero on Instagram. Please subscribe to the podcast and give us a good rating, 5 stars, please. And thank you. Also, tell me your stories about these subjects at DOML_AMOUR on Instagram or at domlamour.com. I'm Dom Lamour. Much love.